Sup y'all, and welcome to Technological and Environmental Transformations Part 3. In this video, we're going to investigate the start of civilization. The most successful places where farming occurred were along fertile river valleys where annual flooding restored the soil fertility each year. Instead of people moving to find more arable land, as in shifting cultivation, the nutrients came to them. This allowed for more long-term permanent settlements and greater population densities. The most significant regions in which this occurred were the Nile River in northern Africa, the Indus River in modern-day Pakistan, the Yellow River or the Huanghe in China, along the Andes in modern-day Peru, and around Mesoamerica in modern-day Mexico. However, the greatest of all was the Fertile Crescent along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The first agricultural villages formed out of these permanent settlements. Most of these villages were largely egalitarian, where people shared resources in order to survive. One of the most significant turning points in human history occurred starting around 3500 BCE. It was at this time the first civilizations emerged, which are advanced cultures characterized by social hierarchies, symbolic communication forms, and a separation from the natural environment. The first urban revolution started around 3500 BCE on the supercontinent of Eurasia along the Fertile Crescent, aptly named the Cradle of Civilization. And you can see some of the city-states highlighted within the Mesopotamian state of Sumer in the map on your screen. Interestingly, it's highly likely that most villagers were not always better off than their hunter-gatherer counterparts. Most farmers had to work longer and harder hours, producing enough food for themselves as well as a surplus for taxes within the villages. They had a worse diet with less variety in nutrition, making them shorter over time. Morbidity rates, or the relative frequency of sickness or disease, was also higher. Living in close proximity to animals and each other sometimes brought on epidemics or outbreaks of disease. However, living in villages did provide some significant advantages, as opposed to hunting and gathering. Because they could produce greater surpluses of food, people could engage in activities other than farming, making villages more productive. Specialists emerged with skills in areas such as metalworking, engineering, and accounting. A secondary products revolution began perhaps around 4000 BCE. Domesticated animals were used increasingly for things other than meat, for example, milk, wool, and manure for fertilizer. Additionally, animals were used for riding and plowing, making villagers even more productive. Another advantage was security. Mortality rates, or the relative frequency of deaths in a population, is higher in hunter-gatherer societies, which can tend to be more violent. If a group lacked food or resources, they might take what they needed from other groups. As many as 30% of adult hunter-gatherer males died from homicide. Agricultural villages could support more people, and there was strength in numbers. A final advantage was predictability. With little to no storage of surplus food, hunter-gatherers were more vulnerable to changing conditions. On the other hand, the steadier supply of food in villages was extremely appealing. The perception of a more certain future created a very enticing situation.
You know what I noticed? Nobody panics when things go according to plan, even if the plan is horrifying.
A final reality is that humans are social beings. We prefer to be in close proximity to each other as well as the goods we need for survival and entertainment. Urbanization was a prerequisite for a civilization to form, and we can establish three elements necessary for the formation of both. The first two have already been discussed. A society needs an agricultural surplus, as well as permanent settlements for sedentary living in order to grow and expand. The third element is social stratification, which is a hierarchy of power and class structure within a society. We already mentioned that most people were farmers. However, specialists were also able to develop. Additionally, a leadership class, or elite, would emerge to maintain control and organize their villages. And their power was often hereditary, passing their authority from generation to generation. The first urban hearth and civilization took hold between the Tigris and Euphrates in Mesopotamia, Greek for land between rivers. Developing soon after were the Egyptians along the Nile. Cities served as political and religious centers. Leaders were often viewed as divinely powerful or even to be god kings themselves. As such, cities usually possessed better organization. Cities were also economic nodes where merchants and traders exchanged goods between local markets and faraway lands. They were educational and cultural centers where teachers, philosophers, and students learned from each other and expressed themselves in unique ways. A sort of pre-industrial revolution took hold in the cities, with so many specialists thinking and working collectively. Language also became more specialized, and written language was invented, likely initially by accountants to tabulate goods and taxes. Written language allowed laws to be codified and for science and discovery to often flourish. Mathematics allowed for larger structures to be built, for irrigation to be organized, and for accurate calendars to be created. Tools often became more valuable than weapons. Cities and states, whether they were cooperating or competing, improved each other through the compounding effects of political, economic, and intellectual interaction.
Well, Lottie